take that off, and I don't have a slider to gently take that to... Okay. Well, as you can tell by the title, I believe it's time for Trump to go. I've actually thought it for a long time, but I think the reality of the situation, given what happened last week and the reaction to it, I think it's time to go. I think it's time for him to go. I think it's time for Republicans to realize that there's more important things than supporting a president. Supporting the rule of law is more important. Supporting the Constitution. Supporting the principles of a democracy are more important. Supporting national sovereignty against the interest of other foreign countries such as Russia and Saudi Arabia is more important than supporting a president. And I think the time has come for us to realize that the current president has shown that he is not a president for all the people. He is not a president for the nation. He is a president for himself, his family, and for those who are closest to him. I don't believe Donald Trump cares about the welfare of his own supporters. They are cannon fodder, essentially. They are people to be used to protect him. And he is willing to sacrifice them if necessary to protect himself. Unfortunately, these poor souls don't understand that. They have been brought up in a conservative right-wing media that has distorted the very principles of journalism. That they've distorted this idea that the rule of law is more important than supporting the president because he's your political party. He's the one you voted for. If you remember, nearly 50 years ago now, Richard Nixon won the greatest mandate a president had ever won, or at least in modern times, when he beat McGovern in the 72 election, despite the fact that there were warning signs that Watergate was out there. Less than 2 years later, he was out of office. He was disgraced. And the nation was torn apart. Not just by what happened with Watergate. There were plenty of other things going on at the same time. Vietnam, for one. This time around, it's much worse. Here's why I think it's time for Donald Trump to leave. First of all, the Ukrainian call shows that he's willing to basically trade services, military services, whatever, to benefit himself and his political campaign. Now you're probably saying, well, stuff happens all the time. This isn't anything new. It's much more than just a simple, you scratch my back, I scratch yours in Congress. You vote for this, I'll vote for that. That's not right either. But at the same time, this has national security implications. We're selling military technology to Ukraine to potentially be used against a foreign power that may very well have compromised Donald Trump. And that is a question, I think, that still is yet to be completely, fully answered. But you're saying the Mueller report didn't show any collusion. Of course it showed collusion. It just gave him plausible deniability. The oldest trick in the book. Let your associates do the dirty work. You stay above the fray. Why do you think his son went to the meeting, not him? You think he didn't have anything to do with that? Of course he did. He just wanted to make sure he couldn't be connected directly to it. But that is just a drop in the bucket. There's the whole Emoluments thing. There's the fact that he's profiteering directly from being president by going to these trips to his own resort. It's not that he's giving it for free. The government is paying for his trips to his own resorts, which means, guess what? That money goes into his business. That's not how it's supposed to be. Now, if he were going to these resorts of his to vacation and to spend his weekends, and he wasn't charging the government a dime, I wouldn't have a problem with it. That's like going to his own home, essentially. But he is charging the government. And there's a lot of other things going on, too. He has fooled a lot of his own supporters. And unfortunately, they have not awakened to the reality that those of us who did not embrace Trump mania have realized a long time ago. And that is, this is a cult of personality. And cult of personalities don't usually end well, because the person who is the center of the cult of personality does not have the best interest of his cult at heart. It is his interest alone that he cares about the most. This is a man who I firmly believe would sell his own family out to protect himself. This is a man I firmly believe will do anything to protect himself, including potentially trying to declare martial law and force the military to either seize power from Congress and declare him a dictator, or the most likely event is the military having to go into the White House and force him from office, which would be really bad. I never imagined in my entire life that I would actually think that a military coup could ever take place in the United States, much less think that it would be a good idea, potentially, if the current president were to resort to tactics like I just described. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that if the house of cards does fall on Donald Trump, he'll recognize that there's more important things than just protecting his presidency, and will bow out somewhat gracefully. We know that won't happen. That's the scary part. This is a man who does not know how to quit easily. His business failings, let's face it, he's run away from them. Is he going to run away from the office, knowing that this would destroy any legacy he has? What I think the president's supporters fail to realize is that when you take away all the bluster, all the tweets, all the rallies and such, he's not done a whole hell of a lot except a massive tax cut that in reality hasn't really helped his core supporters all that much, but except for those who are the richest levels in society. You may have seen a little bit of an increase, but the truth is you're still paying more taxes because you lost a lot of those deductions. And the truth of the matter is we're losing, despite these tax cuts, revenue is not increased. Budget deficit this year alone will be over $1 trillion. I remember when the whole budget was $1 trillion, actually less than $1 trillion. And now we have a budget deficit of $1 trillion. And of course, there's the whole wall thing. Remember when he said, and he actually did say it, that Mexico was going to pay for the wall? For those of us who thought that he'll forget this once he'll not really press it that hard. This has been his main thing. Why? It's not to protect us against some sort of immigration invasion. It's a vanity project. A vanity project that will probably cost, if it ever comes to completion, which I don't think it ever will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. This is a vanity project. Pure and simple. It will wreck the environment in that location. It will create a lot more tensions that should not be there. It will not solve the illegal immigration problems. The wall can be scaled. And you can't have every single 100 meters or whatever manned all the time. It's simply impossible. Plus, there's also the fact that there is a proven history of building tunnels under these things, under the border. The truth is that Donald Trump has fooled you if you're a MAGA supporter. He doesn't want to make America great again. He wants to make himself great. Someone who has failed quite a lot at business. Why is the fact that he hasn't released his tax returns? Every president since Ford has released their tax returns. Every presidential candidate has released their tax returns. They want to be shown as being at least above reproach in that matter. Donald Trump hasn't released his. He's promised on many occasions, but has failed to do so. Some of you may say, well, it's his right. He doesn't have to. But you're not answering the most important question. Why isn't he? Has he something to hide? Why shouldn't he release them? He should because, A, it would prove, if he has nothing to hide, that all this talk about Russia having him financially by the cojones is a lot of bunk. But the fact that he continues to hide it leads a reasonable person to believe, I believe, that he does have something to hide. And it is very significant. I personally believe it's the smoking gun. That if his tax return were released, that it would show that he is in debt to people that are not in the best interest of this country, i.e. Russia, and perhaps even Saudi Arabia, and maybe even others. In debt to the point where he would have almost no choice but to bend to their will. And let me tell you the implications of how bad that would be. Imagine, if you will, a president being in debt to, say, Brazil. And the Brazilian president were to say, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to foreclose on your business down here. Now, that's assuming the president of the United States has his business in a, what do they call it? Basically, where it's basically he can't do anything about it. It's basically run by somebody else. He has nothing to do with it. He doesn't want his business to fail. So what does he do? Brazil is not a threat to the United States of America. Russia is. Saudi Arabia is. Russia militarily, Saudi Arabia because they have a lot of oil. They provide us a lot of oil. I firmly believe presidents and all politicians on all levels for that matter, whether it be local, state, or federal, should be transparent, above reproach and completely answerable to the people of this country. More often than not, that hasn't happened on both sides. But in Donald Trump's case, it's far worse. Think about it. Why is it that we're still talking about Hillary Clinton almost 3 years after the election? She did lose the election, allegedly. I think Donald Trump is using her as his Pavlovian response for his supporters, in that he wants them to believe that if push comes to shove, their mortal enemy, Hillary Rodham Clinton, will become president if anything happens to him. Well, that's not the case. We all know, if you paid attention in civics class, that if Donald Trump were forced from office via impeachment and conviction, or if the vice president or members of the cabinet activated the 25th Amendment, Mike Pence would become president of the United States. Unless, of course, Mike Pence is also impeached and convicted. And in that case, Nancy Pelosi becomes president. Of course, I know many of you MAGA heads are going, oh my God, that's even worse. Well, what's worse than a president who may be compromised by a foreign power? Not just any foreign power, but an openly hostile foreign power that has a history of manipulating other countries. This isn't just some state rank-and-file politician that's head of the Russian Federation, folks. This is a former KGB agent. This is a man who remembers how Russia went through the 90s, feeling humiliated, that the great Soviet Union had collapsed, and that in his mind, and in the mind of some folks of his like-mindedness, that Russia had been quote-unquote humiliated. The truth is, that was further from the case. But to him and to others like him, it doesn't matter. It's about bringing Russia back to power. And how does he do it? Well, divide and conquer. Look what's happening in Britain. It would not surprise me one bit if factors related to Russia were involved in both sides of the Brexit campaign. It would not surprise me one bit if Russia were involved in American politics on both sides. But John, you're saying that there might be Russian interference on helping the Democrats? Yeah, there's a possibility that may be happening. If you are a counterintelligence agent, playing both sides against the middle is counterintelligence 101. You play both extremes against the middle. You divide and conquer. That's what they're trying to do to us, folks. And Donald Trump is helping him. If you support Donald Trump, whether you acknowledge it or not, you are supporting division in America. You didn't see that during Reagan's time. You didn't see that during Bush Sr.'s time. You saw that during Bush Jr.'s time. Not because of what he did, but because people close to him. And I think a lot of this started under his administration, not because of him personally, but because of people who thought that they could manipulate the system to where Republicans would stay in power permanently. Do you want to know why that is? Changing demographics. White people aren't having as many babies as African Americans or Hispanic Americans or other minority groups. Why is that? Because Being, quote-unquote, privileged means that you don't have to worry so much about having children to carry on your legacy. Women are more independent. Men feel like, hey, they can wait. Women feel like they can wait. Whereas in the African American community, they feel like that family is very important. That's why they're more encouraged to have children. Same in the Hispanic community. Whites and families are important, but it's not the end-all, be-all of the universe. You can be independent and be a white person. Now, of course, you can be black and independent, Hispanic independent, but this is general numbers. Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Indians from India, not Native Americans, are having more children. Arab Americans having more children than white people. The numbers are there. It's clear. And that scares certain people. Not necessarily racist, but political people who know how to utilize racist. People like Donald Trump and people in his administration. Why is it that all of a sudden white supremacy is a thing now? Not so long ago, white supremacists were like cockroaches under the baseboard. They never showed out until at all during the day because the light was on them. Donald Trump gets elected and they're everywhere. I've always said that racism was always there. Anybody that said it wasn't the case is kidding themselves. It's always been there. It always probably will be there, as much as we wish it weren't. If you think that this is going to end anytime soon, if Trump leaves, that somehow or another, by some miracle, that things will be better and we'll all be singing Kumbaya again, I'm going to disappoint you greatly. It won't happen that way. The risk of impeachment and conviction is that his supporters will decide that they have to act to protect their man. And that's the danger of cult of personality. Will they openly revolt against the government? How would you revolt against the government? God dang it. All right. Well, let me wrap this up by saying this. Something's come up. I have to end the show early, but let me put it to you this way: if Donald Trump leaves office and the people who are his most ardent supporters decide to revolt against the government, who are they going to revolt against? The police? A lot of their supporters are supposedly folks who believe blue lives matter. Does that mean unless they decide that those people don't matter because they support a government that has just overthrown their guy? What about soldiers? These very same people supposedly support soldiers. What if those soldiers are charged to defend the new president, whether it be Pence, Pelosi, or whoever? That is something that must be looked at. I'll talk about this in greater detail another time. But keep in mind that things are going to happen quickly. Keep yourselves aware of what's going on. I have a feeling it could get bad before it gets better. Talk to you later.